Is Drake a social engineering project gone wrong? What if Drake is a tool that some larger entity has been using to normalize certain behaviors, actions, and ideas? What if this larger entity was running an experiment called Drake? Operation Drake. His real name is Aubrey Graham, so who is Drake? I mean, for real, who is Drake? Who is this guy? Now, the same way some companies use hair schools to design in certain hair products, what if Drake has been used to design in specific behaviors that would otherwise be unacceptable? Another social engineering project brought to you by the masters of the universe. Is the Drake we're seeing today the consequence of overindulgence? Or is the cunning Aubrey Graham continuing to troll Kendrick Lamar and all of Black America because he wants to devalue himself to his owners in hopes of getting out of his gilded cage before the age of 40, 45, 50? But why would anyone need to use Drake to normalize massive overindulgence, selfishness, appropriation, and basically hedonistic behavior? I mean, all of that pretty much seems like the norm in current capitalist culture. So why would those behaviors need to be further standardized? Well, for the same reason everything is: to make it easier for profit-driven entities to control the behaviors of young people who are aging out of kid-friendly content, and of course, to continue to make massive amounts of money. That train needs to keep moving. Through social engineering, using his questionable morality, Aubrey Graham's business associates can normalize situations, scenarios, behaviors, philosophies, ideas for an audience who has aged out of Disney and is discovering the real world for the first time. I'll leave it to the PhDs to give you a lesson on social engineering. I'll just tell you that social engineering involves manipulating attitudes and behaviors by private groups of governments. And they use everything, including our intricate social structures like family, religion, the economy, educational institutions, and even websites like the one you are using to watch this video right now. Yes, social media is a powerful tool for social engineering. Maybe that's why it's important for the character we call Drake to keep using it. Basically, any way humans have created to interact with each other, those things can be used to manipulate human behavior, especially music. Remember that time right before this whole Kendrick Lamar beef? Many people thought Aubrey Graham was in the middle of a premature midlife crisis. Y'all remember that? It seems as if he was spiraling out of control. I mean, who would have guessed he would be trying to find another identity to wear, basically? But right before this happened, it looked like Operation Drake was executing an incel normalization mission. I mean, people wrote entire articles about this. He was handing out thousands of dollars and going after Megan Thee Stallion, suggesting she was lying about what happened to her. I mean, why? For what? What was the reason?
What was the reason? What was the reason? I just explained the reason. What was the reason, bitch?
What was the point of inserting himself into her business? Well, some people say it was to make it okay for a segment of the public to treat her like trash. There are so many impressionable young men who are trying to figure out how to navigate through this hellscape that they've inherited from previous generations. And they're doing so without the training previous generations had. Like, we had no choice but to learn how to talk to each other because current technology didn't exist. Even the introverts learned how to hold a basic conversation, even if they were exhausted from dealing with people afterwards. To have a conversation with someone is a skill that must be learned, improved, and mastered, basically. But to master something as complicated as communication, you must have the opportunity to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail again until you reach some level of competency. However, none of this is an excuse for the egregious and hateful behavior towards women, especially after reaching adulthood. Nah, learn how to behave. Learn how to behave and dispose of the spoiled attitude that blames women for everything. People who are dealing with that often look for guidance. They sometimes look for a hero, a champion, you know what I mean? They sometimes look for someone who will tell them that it's not their fault. Someone who would put the blame for their inadequacies onto something or someone else. Not only that, there's a virulent epidemic of narcissism circulating where everything around you, I mean everything, is coercing you into turning yourself into a brand, and that your success or lack thereof hinges on your ability to sell yourself to the general public. So what if you learn how to be an effective brand? What if you become obsessed with being the best form of yourself at all times, regardless of how you truly feel, regardless of who you truly are? What if you become so good at being the brand that you attract billion-dollar corporations who see in you a perfect engineer? Do you see where I'm going with this? When I say engineer, I'm not talking about a mechanical engineer or a chemical engineer. The character Drake is a form of social engineer. But instead of sending out deceptive emails to trick you, he poses as the ultimate version of what you could be. If only you had the money and the opportunities. I think that's why certain people wanted him to succeed. They see themselves in him.
No daddy.
They saw themselves in this social experiment we call Drake. They saw themselves in this social experiment we call Drake. What if they, the masters of the universe, see in you a way to accomplish a goal? What if they see in you a way to accomplish a goal, to affect the behavior of billions of people, to normalize behavior that would further isolate or silo entire populations, to further split you off from a community of people who would have bargaining power, political power, and the power to determine their own futures? Do you see where I'm going with this? The character that is Drake is a conduit, a tool, a means to an end, a way to normalize abnormal behavior. The visual of Drake, surrounded by multiple brides, gives me 70 Virgin Bride PSD. Don't worry if you don't get that reference. But the visual alone speaks to a societal issue whereby women should be content with being one of many. Regardless of the meaning, the visual, what you're seeing on the screen, can mean that women are objects for a man's happiness, or that it's cool to be part of a harem. Just another notch on the bedpost of a man, as long as that man is rich and famous. Drake makes it cool to forever be a man-child. He further cements the idea that it's commendable to be sexually irresponsible. He elevates to a sport the act of going after women who have ties to men that he's beefing with. Through him, it continues to be okay to constantly judge a person's worth by their bank accounts, their Spotify numbers, or their follower count on social media. Were this one regular person deciding to do this, he'd just be another whack person being clowned by his family and friends, right? But this person, Aubrey Graham, has been placed in position, in my opinion, to have exactly the effect he's had for the past 10 years. I could be wrong, but he has a pedigree, a marketable look, and he's far removed, both culturally and physically, child. He is far removed from the original people who created hip-hop. So how does he become a leader in hip-hop? How? Through an elevation of the importance of numbers. That's how. Sales are everything. Streaming numbers are everything. First week sales are everything. To build, to quote Drake, you must have the backing of powerful people to ensure the numbers provide a shield for anyone who would argue against his importance. Skillful manipulation. That's all that is. How many times have you had a negative opinion about something Drake did? And the response from those pony riders is that
he's the #1 artist in the world. He got the #1 song in the world. He got the #1 album in the world.
As if that's a defense for everything. But that's intentional. It is intentional. Because the numbers are controlled by the industry, you have no way of knowing what's accurate. And you're left to assume that everyone else must like this man and that there's something wrong with you. Well, that's on purpose. Manipulation is insidious. It's alluring but harmful. It's treacherous. To be forced or manipulated into leading millions of people down a path is nasty work. That's nasty work. But it's downright diabolical to do so willingly. So is Aubrey Graham a willing participant in the social engineering? Or has he too been exploited? Further, does he want out? Does Aubrey Graham want to break free of the leash that is Drake? And he's using this battle with Kendrick Lamar to decrease his value to his owners. We should have some type of indication as to whether or not this was intentional, whether or not Drake is tired of being Drake, and he's trying to decrease the value that they find in him so they'll let him go earlier than expected, or earlier than the contract says. Y'all stay tuned.